Oh, I've got it.
Hello. Hi.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Good. It's good to see you again.
Lovely to see you again. The reason why we're saying again is because we've just spent a little over an hour discussing the first half of our poetry advent, which is run throughout December up to the winter solstice. And today is the winter solstice, so we decided that we were going to take our conversation from poetry and bring it into a Zoom call and share it with all of you. So I'm Amy Palco, and
I'm Jackie Rose.
and we both have knitting podcasts on YouTube. I have got The Meaningful Stitch, and Jackie has Caddy Jacks Knits with Caitlin. And so we have this incredible love of knitting, but we also have an incredible love of poetry. So this is really our opportunity to get to dive into some of that and share it with all of you. And so what I would recommend, if you are just coming to this and you've just discovered it on my channel, then first go and hop over to Caddy Jack's Knits channel, watch the first half, and then come back here and watch the second half. Because we're going to be starting from day 11 going up to day 20. I'm sure both the episodes would stand as complete in and of themselves, but I think you probably will get more out of the conversation if you start from the very beginning. So, my love, do you want to start us off with day 11?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Now, can I?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I need to share my screen. Yeah. Hang on. There we are. Can you see that?
Okay. Oh, yes. So, Horace. I wanted to invite something sort of ancient into our conversation. So, Horace. Come, wanton winds, and blow my fears and sorrows to the Cretan sea. Friends with the muses, what care I to know which monarch holds the chilly north in fee, or why Armenian kings shake in their buskins? Weave thy roses red, Pamplea, regent of the lucid springs, in sunny garlands for my Lamia's head. Vain were my little skill, without my sisterhood, his worth to tell. Bless then my lyre, and teach the lesbian quill to pluck new strings, that I may praise him well. So it's funny, I was introduced to Horace actually through a physics book, and each chapter was introduced with an ode by Horace. And I read the book and I listened to Benedict Cumberbatch. Is that how you say his name?
Benedict Cumberbatch, yeah.
Reading Horace, which is quite a treat. Such a treat. So I just have this fondness for just the melodious, exquisite words that come out of a Horace ode. And I also just really enjoy evoking a distant past, a distant time. There's just something that feels like, this is a treat. This is a pleasure. I'm going to indulge in this. I suppose like somebody might indulge. I know nothing about this in an alcoholic beverage that's been aged, right? There's probably a vintage to it. And that's how I feel about Horace. And so it's mostly, I chose this just because it's so lovely. And again, it says it kind of repeats the same ideas that we've been talking about, where to accept the circumstances and to reach for a creative expression at the same time, to utilize. And in this way, the creative expression is not just that you're isolated and alone, but they're the muses that are there to assist you. And so that there's a whole creative community that is bountiful at your disposal, that speaks in a different voice than the voice of the kings and of the worldly. And so But I mean, just the word choice is so lovely. So that was really why Horace got to join us today.
I love that you chose this. Again, it's such a pleasure to encounter and to connect with it. And, it makes me think as well about the amazing, nature of our creative self-expression and the potential longevity that it has, is that we're tapping into something here embedded within the collective consciousness, the collective unconscious even, which then transcends, the worldly, the kings or the material or, history in that sense, but actually taps into something spiritual and taps into something, again, within the mystery, where we start to see centuries and millennia collapse in upon themselves so that we can then encounter this ode for the first time and feel that it speaks to us personally, and that being able to project one's voice through the years, I think it's it's an incredibly magical gift, and I think that's divinely inspired, and as it shows in these particular verses.
And Horace is a perfect case in point of those rules that Stephen Fry talked about that we introduced in the first one of read it aloud, read it again, and don't be afraid. I mean, because there's plenty in this poem that I don't know, I don't know the references to. I looked up the island of Pimplea, but I don't need to know everything about it.
Yeah.
As well. I can enjoy the music of it, and then I can encounter it and maybe know more the next time too.
And then, of course, every single time you connect with it, like we were saying before, is that this is an invitation to connect with it anew, and have a new conversation with it.
Absolutely.
Oh, beautiful. Well, we went from Horace to Sarah Rule. So I will share the screen. There we go. So, I wanted music. I wanted music, yes. But I also wanted the music of everyday things. A plate, an arm, some dirt, a chair. How a plant is related to a window. How a window is related to a chair. Small words with purpose, correspondences of everyday things. The music of combustible objects, one day ending, not tracking for posterity, but loosening like a fig. The reason why I chose this is because I thought it flowed so perfectly from the previous poem, which, what is, such a beautiful piece and a very ancient piece. And then bringing this right up to date, it's felt incredibly contemporary and very domestic. We're out of the realm of gods and kings and muses and the large archetypes or metaphorical references, and we're in, how does a window relate to a chair, and really kind of bringing it back into the very, stuff of our lives, the literal furniture of our everyday. But that last line, the loosening like a fig, I thought the fig was the reference back to the Greek or to the ancient poetry, and again, holding that kind of mythic reference as well, because the fig is such a strong metaphor and symbol. So I just that's the reason why I chose it, is because I felt like it took us from like the epic to the domestic in one fell swoop, but still related.
Right. I thought it was like the word in the Horace poem of buskins, which is such a wonderful, a wonderful object, but it's going from an object to an object, So I agree. I thought that was a wonderful juxtaposition. And then when I looked her up. Isn't she a novelist and a playwright and all that? She has lots of, again, in that sense of exploring who people are. I was like, oh, I've never heard of her. I don't know. And I mean, her biography isn't why we're here necessarily, but am I correct, or do you know the story about her fate?
I don't.
One of our authors today has the situation where she was an actress, I think it's this one, and in theater and a playwright, and her face became paralyzed. And so she writes this book called Smile about that experience of, again, I thought, oh, I might want to read that. And I love the abundance of literature that's out there for us to find.
It's like you kind of tap into a poem, and then it opens up something else, and then something else, and then something else. It's rhizomatic in that sense, it's and. There's always something else to go and explore, a springboard into the next poem, the next song, the next play, the next book.
Yes. It's so infinite, even just like the objects that we surround ourselves with, that are, like we mentioned in the first one, this is the shawl that brought us into a friendship, into relationship. So it's here and it has meaning, but who would know?
Yeah, it has meaning because we bring the meaning to it. It's being interpolated into our symbology of our friendship.
And we all have that opportunity to make meaning in our lives. And there's so many gorgeous poems about the objects and everyday things and our being embodied and brief and here to have an encounter with this experience of, so we'll carry on, but thank you for that one. That was lovely.
Well, we have day 13 next. This was a real favorite when you shared this one.
Oh, good. I don't know what it is.
This is I feel like I'm in a position of power here. I'm like going, I've got the gift of foresight.
Okay. Read first, then talk.
Okay.
I mean, I'm reminding myself because I want a preamble, but I won't. Okay. But my only preamble will be like, look at how it just did the Horace and the Sarah Teal, like it's right here. But anyways, back to the poem. Psyche and Eros in Florida. In the subtropics, it must be spring. A flock of cedar waxwings whispering has tethered the unswayed cabbage palm to the last day's heat. They devour the fruit no local bird wants. Unswerving, they swerve through clotheslines. Let their whispery cries be mine. Their whisper of wings is yours. But what good is sight? In the dark, I thought, lay the struggle of mind over body that kept Aquinas awake. Whoever you were, you slept on. By candlelight, nothing is not beautiful. The relief of your finely sculpted head, the drop of wax that fell on your bare shoulder. Why didn't you want me to see you? Drop of red on each wing almost glows, this hour neither dark nor light. Waxwings, forgive me. Fly away north. What was the dark like? I remembered the mind fogged with something not dream, and afterwards, what of the traitorous, languorous body? It lies down. It begs. Okay. I have always loved Orpheus and Eurydice, but I wasn't as familiar with Psyche and Eros until recently. And again, I've been reading Stephen Fry. He did several books retelling Greek mythology. And I just need to briefly say what I loved so much about Psyche and Eros was that Psyche was this beautiful daughter, and she had siblings and, suitors and all of that. But there was an oracle that said that she must be sacrificed to the thing we fear most. And her daughters were busy marrying like stuffy businessmen and stuff like that. And suitors were always coming and saying, "You're so beautiful." And she just didn't feel fulfilled by her life with her family. And so when this oracle came up, she was like, "Fine, like surrender, sacrifice me, because this is just not working for me." And they take her up to the top of the mountain, and everyone's weeping and wailing, and they finally leave, and there she is, mountaintop, and just this quiet, clear, beautiful day. And she's waiting, thinking, when is the storm going to happen? When is this terrible monster coming? But I'm ready, fine. And she just feels this little breeze, and she feels it gently surrounding her. And then suddenly she's lifted, and she's lifted up and brought over her into the sky, into her own, above her own kingdom, and then to some magical land, and she's deposited in an enchanted castle, which is just the kind of fairy tale I would have loved as a little girl, right? Very Beauty and the Beast-esque, with servants and gold and fruit and clothing. And do you remember that the Dior haute couture video that we watched together about the tarot?
The tarot, yeah.
Absolutely beautiful. And she just sort of surrendered and accepted and went through. She ate a little, she was dressed, but they wouldn't tell her anything. And then she was put to bed. And then in bed, it became dark, and she couldn't see, but I think she first smelled something pleasant and felt this breeze again, and then she felt the heat of this presence. And then finally she felt the covers lift and a body enter her bed. And this was like, okay, it all felt pleasant though, but she knew this was the devouring monster. And then she felt, and it was pleasant and desirable, and as the myth goes, every night her lover comes, and and he must leave her, and she can't see him. But that story of fear of it's a very classic tale, what you fear and surrendering, and then it not being terrible after all, and just to be so open. I love that so much. And then I love that the agency, instead of it being Orpheus who looks at Eurydice and loses her, as the story goes, her sisters are jealous, and they say, "Oh," and she becomes pregnant, and they're like, "You must have a monster's baby in you. He's tricked you, and he is absolutely, you are going to give birth to something dreadful." And she doesn't trust herself in that moment, and they say, "You have to look, you have to look at him." And so when she does look, that's what the candlelight is. She looks, and she sees that it's, this beautiful winged Eros, who she'd met earlier in her life. And then he's like, "You doubted me," and he disappears, and she has to go through a series of trials of reclaiming him. And I think that story is just one of, and I've given like a brief version of it, but I needed to find more I needed to find out what poets had to say about the two of them. And as you said in an earlier comment, you said the bringing the union of the soul and the body. I mean, that's what this story is uniting those. And that is this it's an act of faith, and it's an act of beauty, and it's an act of possibly horribly ugly. That beauty isn't about a surface quality. It is a spiritual quality in this case, I think. So going to, so I'm getting lost in the myth right now and not talking about the poem, but the poem itself, then that here's this other woman in the world at this time of year who's also been moved by this poem. I felt so connected to her. I'd never heard of Deborah Gregor. I literally, after I encountered that myth, like Googled poems about Psyche and Eros because I just wanted to see what was out there. And of course, again, a very personal, intimate thing that I find when the waxwings visit, the sound of the waxwings, I find that incredibly enchanting. It kind of reminds me, I've never heard it, but I've seen it in movies in Tibet. There are these little bells that kind of lead to the temples, and waxwings have that sound to me of something like, here's something quiet, and you only get to kind of be aware of waxwings if you're slowed down enough to hear them, because they're not big showy things. They're just subtle beauty. So the fact that that she's admiring these waxwings and connecting them to this myth, I mean, just that like creative, acrobatic, I admired that she was doing that in the poem. And the fact that she also, has this, just includes all that same mystery, and then in the end goes back to the body. And just like the end of the Emily Dickinson poems where it said, it's almost straight, when she says the body lies down and it begs, I thought that was so gorgeous, because it wasn't like solved. It wasn't like, oh, the body, you'll unite your soul and your body and it'll all just go well for you. No. It's ongoing. And I feel like the version, for whatever reason, for me, the body begging, is it has needs, and it will continue to have needs. I feel that in my own aging and watching my body age. And I know other people have gone through this before me, but it's such a strange phenomenon of not having control and having to surrender, etc. And so again, it's just this another opportunity to play with the dark and the light and the body and the spirit and the tangible things of here and now, like these cedar waxwings visiting me, and then the memory of this mythological encounter of Eros and Psyche, and then Thomas Aquinas, who I'm assuming is super cerebral and all of that. I just was like, aha, and just really enjoyed it. Kind of like the song that we encountered before in the earlier poem. That poem was just like a song that visited me, and I just enjoyed the like spectacle of it. And so I shared it.
I love it. And thank you so much for sharing, the beginning, certainly, of the myth and introducing that. And it's just so beautiful. And like you say, the use of this particular metaphor of the waxwings within the poem it's so clever, and it's so beautiful. And I also really liked what you said about, how the very last stanza, leaves things relatively open. And I think that's so important when we're encountering myths, like again with the Rumi unfold your own myth, that actually these are not contained, complete and somehow unattainable narratives by which to see our lives through. They are ongoing narrative, spooling through our everyday, and they are changing. Our relationship to them changes. Our connection to them shifts. So we might have this very ancient narrative, this very ancient myth, but it's rendered contemporary and relatable and present and ongoing. And it will be ongoing because the myths always speak to human behavior. They're trying to explain, why we respond in the ways that we respond, and actually that's ongoing. That's unfolding throughout time and throughout place. So, I think that the mapping of the nature of myth upon this particular poem fits really beautifully, and I wonder whether it's the wax wings that weave that weave the connection through there, swerving yet unswerving.
I know. I loved her double negatives and contradictions in the poem itself, in the very language. Never not beautiful and swerving unswerving, which just reinforce what you're saying. Yeah. I thought the poem was an exquisite example of the way we make our life meaningful. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think myth is a really good way to do that. And I think actually what you've done, through your own sort of exploration of psyche, it's almost like an archetype starts to stalk us. It's like we start to go, oh, there's something there for me. What is that? And then we revisit the myth. And then, like you said, you went and Googled for poetry, retell this story for me in different forms. Is there a song? Is there imagery? Is there artwork? What is there a ballet piece, or, any particular form? And then just actually being out in our everyday, and then we start to see images from the myths, from the archetypes being reflected back to us in our everyday, or perhaps it's in the cadence of somebody's speech, or whatever it is, it starts to become multi-dimensional for us. And I think you really showed that really beautifully when you shared this particular poem with us.
Thank you. I mean, I loved it.
Well, I followed that one up on day 14 with this one here. Sitting alone in Hagia Sophia. Cathedrals for sure, Charles Wright. What else do you pray for? Cathedrals for sure, and from the inside. Sunlight and all that ancient slanting dust, a streaming you've entered. The air golden with it, so solid it makes you believe this is a place a mountain has been. And the air is still dreaming about it. And this is the place for robes, sandaled feet, knees that unfold and fold with equanimity. No calluses, sweet-smelling skin, and the body at last willing to sit still. Waiting for the temple birds to come down from their high windows. Hello, birds. They're breathing your own breathing, curling sheets of familiar music. Small, fat birds, little brown cathedrals of kindness, for sure. Oh, I don't think I've ever read that poem out loud before, but I feel really moved by it, actually. Again, for me, it's this meeting point between the very humble with the high spiritual nature, the high spiritual of the cathedral, and yet these are the small fat birds, little brown cathedrals of kindness, for sure. So that actually cathedrals are very grand and very spiritual, but actually the small fat birds are also the holders and the manifestors of the spiritual also. And I felt really very moved, I think, by that in particular. So yeah, I shared it, I think, because, well, partially because of the wax wings, and again, because I think we're speaking about the mythic, the mystical, the mystery, the spirit, the soul, and how does that become translated into the material realm, whether it's through, man-made architecture, whether it's through the sandaled feet and the knees that are folding and unfolding, or whether it's this visitation of these temple birds. It feels like it's the soul made manifest in a multitude of physical form.
Or whether it's simply being on a Zoom call listening to you read that poem because I loved hearing you read that poem. I loved the quiet before it started, and I loved the space of the poem. I actually felt transported to like my child self at a read aloud. And there's something so naive and receptive and open to delight when you're a child receiving. And it's something that I don't know, that I feel like you created in that just now in reading that for me, and reminding me of like that is still available even when you're an adult. That's still available to not know what the next, I mean, I've read it before, but I didn't have the experience of you reading it. So I just enjoyed that encounter as an encounter.
Yeah. I think that phrase, that little bit where it says hello birds, I think that really does speak to that child self, doesn't it? Where you're saying hello to the birds, and you're saying hello to the to the bicycle, or to or to the trees, or to the cars, or and it's that investing of the soul in everything that you see, so that you suddenly enter into relationship with everything, rather than being this solipsistic individual who exists solely within the material of their own flesh. That there's actually this calling to engage with the world in a different conversation.
And isn't it amazing? Like, you could leave birds as a symbol of innocence and a symbol of spirit, and you could leave them apart from you and up in the sky and all of that. But I think the idea is to call that within yourself and claim your own aspirations, your own innocence, your own connection to that same, I don't know what it is, that same mystery.
That calling.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, 15. This is one that you've
so funny. I'm always like,
I know.
What have I done? Oh, okay. Louise Gluck, Immortal Love. Like a door, the body opened and soul looked out. Timidly at first, then less timidly, until it was safe. Then in hunger it ventured, then in brazen hunger, then at the invitation of any desire. Promiscuous one, how will you find God now? How will you ascertain the divine? Even in the garden, you were told to live in the body, not outside it, and suffer in it, if that comes to be necessary. How will God find you if you are never in one place long enough, never in the home he gave you? I love that. I love it in this Advent. I almost feel like that poem, isn't it amazing that it exists outside of our Advent, but within our Advent? Honestly, I feel like we're having a feast right now, and we've just brought another course.
Yeah.
I don't know anything new to say about that poem. It's just reiterating. But there are, I will say, I absolutely adored Abe. I adored the line "promiscuous one," to be the like tender way of referring.
Yes.
I loved that. And I loved that God wasn't capitalized. It just seemed softer to me. And again, the body, the spirit, the quest, and the being still and the finding home, Those are the things. And she is, this particular poet uses a lot of mythology and whatnot in her imagery. And so it's very rich in that. And in this particular poem, she did not, but that's where I found her. And I think she just won the Nobel Prize last year, maybe. Her books are so good, but Immortal Love, I don't have anything more to say. I just loved it so much.
Yeah, I love it too. I love it too. And I think it is this reminder, actually, that transcendence is not the goal. It's not about, moving out and up, but actually if the invitation is actually to come in and down, and to actually connect with what's really here and available to us in this embodied experience, because it is such a finite experience. So why would we not want to engage with it right now? And yes, absolutely, that is not to take away from the fact that sometimes an embodied experience is an incredibly uncomfortable and painful one. And it can also be an incredibly beautiful and deeply blissful, pleasurable one. And then sometimes it's just a bit of a boring one, or, it's the full range of experience, but that it's actually all available to us because we have a body, because we have this, we are living in this particular expression of matter. And that matters.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I love that we can keep coming to poetry, keep coming back and back, a new person and another, the same person at this. We can be new and the same at the same time. And we can understand it we can bring to it the understanding that we have at the moment, because our capacity to be embodied and accept ourselves and embrace what is a challenge to, that is just very fluid. It's very fluid.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we went from Immortal Love to Day 16 and Soil. Soil by Irene P. Mattu. Soil. The way you say soil sounds like soul, as in, after we walked through the woods, my feet were covered in soul. When it rains, the soul turns to mud. The soul is made of decomposed plant and animal matter. Edaphology is the study of the soul's influence on living things, while pedology is the study of how the soul is formed, its particular granularity. You are rooted in a certain red patch of soul that bled you and your 100 cousins to life, a slow, warm river you call home. Maybe there is soul under everything, even when we strike rock first. The way you say soil, you make a poem out of every speck of dirt. I really loved that. I think it was because it's this kind of play on the similarity between the two words. And I think, again, the soul is, this revered and very etheric and numinous expression of our experience. And yet this is comparing it to soil. It's the decomposed plant and animal matter. It's what's it gets turned to mud when it rains, and it's bringing the earthly to the etheric. And I really appreciated that. And then that very last stanza, the way you say soil, you make a poem come out of every speck of dirt. And I just thought, so again, the nature between the nature of the conversation between poetry and soul, has been one which has been elevated, one which has removed us from the soil. And actually this is about a reinvestment of that, of the soul, the soil and the poetry coming together. And it just felt Yeah, I just really liked it.
And I looked her up too, and she's a physician and a poet. And I was just curious how you found her poems too.
Again, this is one of the ones that I found online. So I think I follow probably 4 or 5 accounts on Instagram that just share poetry every day. And so which I really love, because the majority of my Instagram feed is knitting. So I'll be scrolling through and you'll see, new designs, or you'll see, skeins of yarn, or,
Right.
people, whatever it is, it's just one after the other. And then a poem appears and it's like, oh, and it interrupts, in much the same way as I think this poem does, where our easy ways of understanding soul are interrupted by the comparison with soil. And so that interruption comes, and I'm taken out of the mindless scrolling, or the flood of images and color, and I'm brought into relationship with something else, something deeper, something that's more myself, actually. And so I found this. This was one of the ones that I found while I was moving through the Instagram scroll.
And it's again, the body of the earth. Of course, I've been reading the Greek mythologies of Gaia, and I'm really struck by that having it be an idea that you're familiar with is completely different than being something that you know, that you as we would say, embody, and because I've listened to the poem, but it would still be hard for me to go outside and look at soil and think of it as having any connection to me. I'm just admitting, as a modern person, that's very hard for me. So I'm seeing it as a poem, and I'm seeing it as a poem that is at a distance from where I'm at. I mean, we don't need to get into my horticulture major or my father raised on a farm, but but obviously I just, in general, how modern, again, the ills of modern living and being so disconnected from our source.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And that fissure rather, between body and spirit has the problematic through the Industrial Revolution that we're experiencing now. And that's what the poem is, like intellectually, I understand the poem is in that space. But I haven't, it's easier for me to imagine myself falling in love than at this moment than gardening and having an epiphany. but they're possible. They're all possible. It made me go ahead.
It made me think a little bit as well about Persephone and going down into the earth. If we're in our Greek myth phase, actually there's an older myth than the one many are familiar with, because the most familiar one is when she's abducted by Hades and taken down into the underworld. But there's an earlier myth where she becomes fascinated by the nature of seeds, and how when we plant a seed in the soil, something incredible happens, and something grows, and from that all life is sustained, and so what is the nature of that magic? And so her curiosity takes her down into the underworld, because she wants to find the magic of the soil.
I love that. And it reminds me of, again, we're doing this at the solstice. The dark, we think of the dark so often as the night, dark sky, short day of the year, as something solar and related to that. But the dark womb of the earth is the other darkness, and we exist between those two darknesses. Yeah.
Yum. Okay, 17. I'm gonna share my screen.
Okay. And I know what it is, I think, because I saw a peek this time. Yes, Yeats. And, ooh, okay. This is to the rose upon the rood of time. Red rose, proud rose, sad rose of all my days, come near me while I sing the ancient ways. Cuchulainn, battling with the bitter tide, the druid, gray, wood-nurtured, quiet-eyed, who cast round Fergus streams and ruin untold, and thine own sadness, whereof stars grown old and dancing silver-sandaled on the sea, sing in their high and lonely melody. Come near, that no more blinded by man's fate, I find under the boughs of love and hate, in all poor foolish things that live a day, eternal beauty wandering on her way. Come near, come near, come near. Ah, leave me still a little space for the rose breath to fill, lest I no more hear common things that crave. The weak worm hiding down in its small cave, the field mouse running by me in the grass, and heavy mortal hopes that toil and pass, but seek alone to hear the strange things said by God to the bright hearts of those long dead, and learn to chant a tongue men do not know. Come near, I would, before my time to go. Sing of old ire and the ancient ways, red rose, proud rose, sad rose of all my days. Okay. Utter masterpiece. And I'm so glad it came late in our Advent, because I feel like our Advent unfolds this poem, you know, kind of naturally. Poems that came before it. And this is a poem that has had horrible things done to it. If you look online, you could see that there are 20 million, like, study this for your exam, and this 101, you know, and it's like the worst, the most frightening, horrible way to encounter poetry is possible with this poem. And I don't want to do that to anyone. And I want to start off with that second rule again. You don't have to understand everything. You know, you don't have to look up all the Irish legends. You don't have to, it doesn't have to mean the Irish land itself. You know, it can mean what it needs to mean in the moment for you, first and foremost. I think that's the greatest gift I ever had. And the foundation of my poetry reading was in first grade, being given an anthology by my mother. And I would just flip through and find the ones that spoke to me. There was no pressure to say what it meant. And I think this one spoke to me because of everything that was coming before it in our Advent. And I loved how it amplified those things. So, of course, I loved the language, you know, and thine own sadness, whereof stars grown old and dancing silver sandaled on the sea, sing in their high and lonely melody. I mean, like, who wouldn't love that, right? And I love the repetition, come near, come near, come near, over and over. It reminds me of Tennyson's Come Down, O Maid. You know, I love it. And I also have been so humbled because repetition is something I truly need as a human being. So when I see it showing up in a poem, I'm so grateful for it. And I just think it underscores that you don't say come near once and you've got it. It's just not how it works. And again, the imagery of I want to stay out of my head and in my heart with this. It's just the tenderness of the everyday things, and seeing that there's mystery in them, and seeing that there's an opportunity for compassion there, and the compassion you can practice in watching something small or foolish, you can also apply upon yourself. And the one thing I did have to look up, or I did look up for sure, was Rood of Time. And maybe you know more about it than I do, but from what my understanding is it's like a crucifix, and it's like an access point, and it is this point where the body and the soul and the spirit are united. And so I think it's just, again, underscoring, because here we are with our to-do lists and our schedules and our all those things to remind us that we are contemporary beings and we are ancient beings, and that we are part of a mystery, and we aren't just what we think we are. And I think he says that so well in here. So I included the poem. I loved it.
It's an incredibly beautiful poem. He writes so well, doesn't he? And he has such a turn of phrase. And I felt really met by the beauty of the language. And like you say, you don't need to understand it. You don't need to know all the references. You just need to listen to the cadence and the rhythm of the words, and you know, the rhyming at the end of each line. I think I suppose it's a slightly more traditional form of poetry, you know, with the focus on rhyme, but the way he does it is actually very subtle, you know, and I feel as though it really lends itself well to the rhythm and the fluidity of the poem. So it doesn't come to the end, you know, with the dudum. It's you know, there's a flowing, there's a fluidity to it, which I really appreciated. And yeah, this imagery of the rose, which is what I then picked up for our next poem, day 18. So share screen. There we go. Can you see? Oh no, not yet. There we go. Can you see now?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is a Robert Burns poem, A Red, Red Rose. Oh, my love's like a red, red rose that's newly sprung in June. My love is like the melody that's sweetly played in tune. As fair art thou, my bonny lass, so deep in love am I, and I will love thee still, my dear, till all the seas gang dry. Till all the seas gang dry, my dear, and rocks melt with the sun, I will love thee still, my dear, while the sands of life shall run. And fare thee weel, my only love, and fare thee weel a while, and I will come again, my love, though it were 10,000 mile. I think that's my favourite Burns poem. I think one of the things I love about it, and I feel this about the previous poem as well, is that it feels as though there's a lot of love present, and I think it's very easy to kind of create an imagined other, or like a narrative between two lovers, or between a speaker and a listener, or and when I engage with this particular poem, I think that becomes very simplified to do. You know, we can absolutely, you know, read it as, you know, say Robert Burns or the speaker, you know, sending this love poem to another, to a desired other. And yet I like the thought of it being a missive from the mystery. So the mystery is calling me, you know, their love, and, you know, as fair art thou, my bonny lass, so deep in love am I. You know, that having that kind of that romantic relationship with the divine, I think is becomes much more available to you through the medium of poetry. so that when we read love poetry, and I know that we have discussed the possibilities of exploring love poetry a bit more in 2023, but in this kind of in exploring love poetry in particular, taking it out of that context between two people and seeing it as a relationship that you have with the mystery.
I love that you said that. I've never thought of that poem in that context, but I love it when you say it that way. And it reminds me of the word beloved, which is so often used in the like Hafez will refer to God as beloved, and Rumi will, and there's psalms that it's very intimate like that. It's wonderful. We'll be coming to. It's funny because the transition for me for that poem and this poem is, as a teacher, I was Mrs. Rose. That was my name. My teacher name.
Well, on that note, we will encounter. I loved this next poem. I loved it. There we go.
So it's what you missed that day you were absent from 4th grade. Mrs. Nelson explained how to stand still and listen to the wind, how to find meaning in pumping gas, how peeling potatoes can be a form of prayer. She took questions on how not to feel lost in the dark. After lunch, she distributed worksheets that covered ways to remember your grandfather's voice. Then the class discussed falling asleep without feeling you had forgotten to do something else, something important, and how to believe the house you wake in is your home. This prompted Mrs. Nelson to draw a chalkboard diagram detailing how to chant the Psalms during cigarette breaks, and how not to squirm for sound when your own thoughts are all you hear. Also, that you have enough. The English lesson was that I am is a complete sentence. And just before the afternoon bell, she made the math equation look easy. The one that proves that hundreds of questions and feeling cold and all those nights spent looking for whatever it was you lost and one person add up to something. Okay, deeply personal choice because I've been a 3rd grade teacher forever. And this time last year, I left the classroom. And when I read that, I mean, it's a fictional teacher, but it just reminded me, I mean, I feel it right here. I can feel it right now, like how much I loved teaching and moments that we would have like that. And it was such a treasure. And it was just really just a gift from the universe to like give that back to me, because this kind of ticker tape brain doesn't remember the way that poem reminded me to remember. And to teach like that, you were always a subversive, of course. You were always a subversive to love your students and to invite them into everything that these poets have invited us into today. So I just felt so grateful to find that. And obviously I could go through line by line and how much it fits into our Advent. Right? But again, just like when you read the poem earlier to me and it took me back to my childhood, like the Advent itself is a living thing that we actually manifested, like making meaning together. You in Scotland, me in the Midwest of the United States. So I feel very humbled and grateful for the opportunity and like the space that we made together, and not you and I, just you and I, but these poets, and then the the friends that we hope have been enjoying the poems with us, or who might be joining us here today on this video. So I just feel so grateful. And of course, grateful for teachers like that who are transmitting these absolutely essential lessons that you can't find in a textbook, because you have to live it yourself. You have to live your own pain, your own quest, your own sense of mystery and identity. And you that's not available to teach as curriculum unless you live it in your life. And those teachers are priceless. And I'm so grateful for the people who've taught me and who have given me those little moments. And if I could ever be one every once in a while for someone, I'm glad for that too. And I love how that poem celebrates that. That it kind of harkens back to the beginning, in my opinion, where it's like a communal becoming as well as an individual.
Yeah. Oh, when I read it, I thought, oh, this is absolutely Jackie's teaching practice and her teaching ethos encapsulated in a poem, and just done so beautifully. And yeah, now that I've read this poem, and it's because you contributed it to the Advent, as you have, the other poems, but this one for me, I feel, is just so evocative of so many of our conversations that we've had in the past about teaching and about showing up for your students, and about creating a classroom that's founded in compassion and breeds empathy, and just deeply appreciative of it. And yes, within the context of the Advent, it makes me think, because each one of these stanzas could almost be a poem in and of itself. And so it makes me think about how each one of the poems in our Advent is a teacher. If we're willing to show up, then, we can be taught that, kindness and, grandiosity of soul can be found in, the fat little brown bird in the cathedral, or, that love can be transcended through a red rose, or, I think each one of these poems, has an opportunity for us to engage with it as a teacher. And that's what that's how I was connecting to this particular one that you shared.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's good.
We have one more, the last one. Share screen. Here we go. So this is called For the Children. The rising hills, the slopes of statistics lie before us. The steep climb of everything going up, up, as we all go down. In the next century, or the one beyond that, they say, are valleys, pastures. We can meet there in peace if we make it. To climb these coming crests, one word to you and your children. Stay together, learn the flowers, go light. It really reminded me of that wonderful line of Rumi's about, there being a field between right doing and wrong doing. I'll meet you there, and about that being these pastures that, collectively we're laboring our way towards, and these rising hills, the slopes of statistics lie before us, so that feels, it feels kind of pessimistic, actually. Like if we looked at the statistics of what's going on in the world now, I think it becomes very easy to drop into kind of a negative space and negative thoughts around it. And yet this feels like a profoundly hopeful poem. And I think it's about remembering that even in the dark, hope is the thing that carries us through. And to get there, we need to stay together, learn the flowers, go light.
I love that. I love that. Asking us to stay together, like reminding us that it's individual and communal, you know, like the first poem that we had in the Advent.
Yeah.
You know,
and in that sense, it loops right the way back round.
Absolutely.
Oh, Jackie, this has been completely delightful. I've so enjoyed going over our poetry together, and this poetry Advent, has just been, a real point of solace and stillness and grace, actually, in the midst of an incredibly busy month. And I know lots of us have had incredibly busy months too. December is that rather frantic, chaotic season. Just at the moment where we're being called to come, inward and to connect with that still point within. So, I feel as though it's so appropriate that we ended our Advent on the solstice, because it's about, almost like spiraling closer and closer in towards that still point within. So, yeah. Deeply grateful.
Thank you. Yeah. And thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. And we'll return. There'll be more poetry Advents in the future.
Yes.
Oh, thank you, everybody. Thank you.